Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've seen Joker.
Which I loved, but Mike is seething. So I want to
hate it.
hear all the ways he hated it.
I want to get your views first. I'm in such a bad mood. And I'm surprised that you loved it.
I loved it.
I get the feeling, and spoilers will be coming up, you know, I mean, this is a story, this is like a new origin story for the Joker, I suppose. Stars Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker / Arthur Fleck, that's the name he's given here. Directed by Todd Phillips, who is better known as a comedy director. Directed the Hangover movies, War Dogs recently, which was kind of comedy drama, but before that he was doing things like Starsky and Hutch, Old School, Road Trip, those kind of frat comedies.
Yes, and I'm surprised by that, actually, because you don't think that the filmmaker who made those films, you know, was capable of making this one.
Well, I do. When I first saw the trailer, actually no, when I first heard that Joaquin Phoenix would be playing the Joker, it was a kind of casting announcement that made you go, really?
He's like, sublime.
How, you know, what, that's a mad thing to imagine. And then you saw the trailer and thought, wow, this looks kind of interesting.
He's sublime. He's better than Heath Ledger.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, it's my view.
I think he acts like an undirected man.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it's a carefully thought through performance, and some of the things that he does with movement is just beautiful.
But I think it's all for nothing.
I don't
his
think
performance.
so.
It's like Todd Phillips said. It's like he couldn't believe he had an actor of Joaquin Phoenix's ability, and went, well, I mean, I can't just do what you want. And
I don't think so. I think, you know, it's a thought through performance. It's full of surprises. It's full of beautiful, elegant gestures. It begins kind of, you know, dampened in this cloud of depression and sadness, you know, and it moves into despair, really. And then kind of, you know, there's that moment, where he's off the drugs and onto attention. And then, like, his whole kind of demeanor and body changes. It's beautiful. And he does really elegant things. And the performance and the mise en scène is part of that. So, you know, there are moments where he's shot from above and all of a sudden he looks beautiful, right? And so I think kind of, you know, the mise en scène and the performance itself are very much in tune. It's gorgeous, I think.
I'm not crazy about how it looks at all. It was shot, I think, on Arri Lexus 65 cameras. This is what my brother was telling me, because he loves Arri Lexus. He gets to work with them every now and again. And it gives you it's a 65mm frame, effectively. They're digital cameras, but they give you this huge sort of frame to work with, and it gives you this incredible depth of field and clarity. And I think the film confuses quality of image with a quality image. You know, it has it looks like a film student's go with a great camera. Look at the depth of field we can do with this. Look at the close-ups we can do.
I don't agree, because in fact all of the beginning of the film there's no depth of field, you know, and again that's part of the conveying of the interiority of the character. You know, what you get in the
That's what I mean. It's a shallow depth of field. It looks like a movie. It looks very self-consciously like a movie. That's what I mean throughout. It's a film that's high on its own self-importance and self-satisfaction.
Well, I mean, it worked for me. And I thought all of that use of the focus at the beginning was like very deliberate. And it kind of evokes, you know, the idea of this man who's losing his grip, who can't get a sense of the world around him, who can only think about one thing at a time, you know, and he's constantly on the verge of losing control. So I think, to me, it evokes that kind of world, and I really loved it.
Fair enough. I think it's like, I mean, people applauded at the end of this screening. It was a very, very full.
I think deservedly. And listen, you know, kind of get off your high horse.
I'm not on a high horse. It's a con job.
Why is it a con job? Actually, you could argue the opposite. It's a very daring to make a superhero film about a character study of a superhero film. We've not seen it before, and this is what this is. And actually, this film has more of a critique of the culture, the system, than any superhero film we've seen. So
Black Panther.
Black Panther to me is always the exception, but actually, kind of, I think, as a character study, it doesn't compare.
I don't think this barely qualifies as a character study.
Oh, I think it does.
No, it's got no character. It thinks it's Taxi Driver. It thinks it's the king of comedy. But actually, this guy's man. Like, he's set up from the start as mentally ill. He knows it, and we know it. He's on medications. He's in therapy.
That's right. The film tells us.
Right. So, and then it builds in this thing of, I mean, for one thing, this is not Gotham City, right? This is New York City. Like, never has Gotham City been more... never has Gotham City been more transparent.
Gotham City has always been transparent in New York City.
More transparent. Never has it been more transparent than this, though. It's always been to some degree. But this is like, they are just filming in New York. This is New York. It's not even pretending. The point is, it's setting it in basically New York of the 1970s.
1981.
Okay, late 70s, early 80s is the era I had in mind. When New York was in the sort of depths of... I mean, wasn't it going for bankruptcy in the mid-70s?
It was, and actually some of the things rhyme. So, there's a garbage strike and rats are overrunning the city and, all of
rats.
that. All of that was true of New York then.
And one of the things that is specifically kind of brought up here is social services being cut. So halfway through the film, Arthur's... medication, he can't get his medication anymore because his therapy is ending.
Social services have cut, yeah.
So it tries to tie it to this kind of this social inequality, and actually very, very transparently so. I mean, it is about that. But actually, as to who Arthur is, what drives him. I mean, I think kind of one of the things that made the Joker that Heath Ledger played so kind of powerful was that he came from nowhere, and you didn't know his backstory, and there was that whole thing in The Dark Knight about how he kind of gave 3 different backstories and none of them was true or whatever. Whereas in this, like, it is all about who this real person is and what would drive him to do what he does, and what drive is not necessarily the right term because it's not entirely calculated, but it kind of becomes more calculated, or he becomes freer to express himself. But kind of as to who he is and what he wants, some of it is kind of clear.
Well,
but
I mean, really, compared to any other comic book novel, this is like a masterpiece of subtlety.
Subtlety?
Yes, and background. Yes.
Subtlety?
Yes.
What's subtle to it?
Well, first of all, they begin by kind of positing this relationship between him and his mother, right? Then, his mother tells him that Bruce Wayne's father, whatever his name is...
Thomas Wayne,
that he is the result of a love affair between, himself and Thomas Wayne. In the middle of all of this, he's somebody who's got issues with depression and other types of mental illness, and all his medication is cut. So in the midst of finding out all of this information, his kind of support system is kind of denied. Then he goes actually to find out about from the Wayne family, or to greet the Wayne family as someone as the son, and he's treated terribly, and he goes, all I want to do is like say hello, like he's not asking for money or anything like that, and he gets rejected. And not only that, but then he finds out that actually his mother has lied to him, that it's a possibility that he's adopted. So he goes to Arkham Asylum to find that out, and then he finds out that he's not only adopted, but that actually his mother permitted his abuse as a child, that he was found tied to a radiator, so starving, suffering from malnutrition, and with his body kind of bruised by beatings. So what you have is a whole kind of series of disillusions, right? All in the middle of someone who's been kicked around and is rendered vulnerable, who's making a living as a clown, right? So I think that's a lot of backstory.
It's a lot of backstory, but what does it add up to in the present day?
Well, what it adds up to in the present day, I think, is, to me, that character of the Joker is a character that lots of people, probably emphasize with. People who have no jobs, who have precarious lives, who are trod upon, who are beaten, there's no recourse in the law, there's no social services to help them, So, and if you think all of this population in the U.S. that's kind of addicted to Oxycontin or, kind of taking meth and trailers or whatever, with no support system at all, always just on the edge of kind of grasping onto things. I think this is a kind of a character that will resonate with lots and lots of Americans.
I think it probably will. I think the Heath Ledger's Joker did as well, but I don't think necessarily for kind of all the right reasons. People sort of just latched on to, rather like I suppose we were talking about Fight Club not long ago, and Tyler Durden and the same sort of thing there, sort of latching on to all the wrong parts of it. And I think what this film leaves us with, by the time you get to the end, and the Joker has kind of unwittingly started this movement of people claiming to be clown. He killed 3 people on the subway, and he's not identified personally, but the news gets out that this person was dressed as a clown, and because the guys he killed on the subway were Wall Street guys, actually they work for Wayne's Corporation.
That's right.
Then there's this thing about kill the rich, and he becomes kind of a hero, or the downtrodden in society kind of take on clown masks as a symbol. And by the end you've got this riot happening, and he becomes, because he kills someone else powerful live on TV, so everyone knows it's him, and he also announces that he was the guy who killed all these people. He becomes a hero of the downtrodden for murder. It reads to me and I think it reads to me as terrifying. That's how it's supposed to come across, I think, and it reads to me as right-wing propaganda.
I can see where you're coming from, but I don't see it that way. I think, for one thing, it's kind of voicing what cannot be voiced, really. Because I think in all of these arguments about the 1%, and the increasing inequality, and this kind of arrogance, and this kind of refusal to see people suffering. One of the solutions, as it was a solution in the Russian Revolution, is actually kill the rich. As soon as you start killing them, they'll start suffering, right? They'll have a different picture of the culture once they're vulnerable in ways that they're now immune to. So, the Joker's not thought it out, like he says, it's not political, but he's exploding, he's reacting, to a world which is very recognizable, and where his role in it is a very recognizable one. All you've got to do is kind of, walk around town and see the homeless.
Well, I certainly think that the moment when he kills the talk show host, Marie Franklin, his name is, played by Robert De Niro, and I think, that's, what's that if not a King of Comedy nod, where he's obsessed with the TV show host.
It's a complete nod to the King of Comedy.
The moment when he kills him, and he's getting kind of quite aggressive on the show, and he tells the joke, he says, what do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that doesn't give a shit about him? You get what you deserve, and shoots him in the head. That was a really powerful moment, I thought.
Yes.
It did. And you understand the Joker completely, and you're with him. But I do think then that when you get out into the riot and you have him being he's stood and he's dancing on top of this police car, a couple of police officers who were arresting him, taking him to jail, have just been killed in a deliberate accident to free him, free the Joker. And you get this crowd of, this is what I think, this is kind of the movie's version of Antifa, the anti-fascists.
There's an element of that.
Which I personally consider to basically be a right-wing invention. I think it was the end of the film reads as this, like I say, this right-wing fantasy of the enemy that they believe they're fighting.
No, I don't think it's a right-wing fantasy. I think there's a real kind of critique of the culture. Though, of course, kind of, the film kind of becomes delirious, really, in many ways. There are moments of Joaquin Phoenix's performance that are just like almost embedded in musical numbers, right? So, he's part of a pop culture. We see him watching Fred Astaire on television. You know, we hear Sondheim, we hear Frank Sinatra. You know, That's Life is kind of like That's Life and Sending the Clowns are recurring motifs in the show. We see Chaplin's Modern Times, right? You know, that beautiful moment where he's skating in the department store, the empty department store at night, and he's always on the verge of falling over, but he gracefully glides, you know, everywhere. Very interestingly, that's shown at the wrong speed in the film within the film, so it has that jerkiness that actually
it's sped up a little, isn't it?
Yeah. So so there's obviously kind of, you know, an attempt made to correlate that, right? And so, you know, the Joker's the opposite of the Tramp in Modern Times, right? Because, you know, the Tramp was hopeful and, you know, could find solutions to things. And, you know, he got caught up in things that were not of his making. You see moments of left-wing kind of revolutionary marches in Modern Times. He just kind of gets caught up in. This is nothing like that. This is a very despairing kind of film, you know? And I thought the ending, you know, was just beautiful, you know. So, like, he's talking to the social worker again, and actually he kills her, and you don't see the killing. It all happens off screen, but it's all told where he walks out of the room, and all of a sudden you see that his footprints are leaving trails of blood, right at the end. I thought that was just beautiful.
Well, beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah, because it speaks to real despair, you know. So yeah.
What was despairing about that killing at the end?
Well, because he's in the asylum, right? He's murder is the only solution for him. You have like this white pure thing, and all of a sudden it's kind of, there's a trail of blood through it, right? And then kind of there's this manic at the end. You know, it's like he does a Bob Fosse thing with his body, right? So, you know, he's on stage now, he's central, he matters, and it's only through murder that a person like him can matter. And then he begins to be chased, you know, by the attendant, or, you know, the guys in the white jackets. I loved all of that.
See, by that point, I think it's supposed to be like he's now turned into the villain. I mean, I suppose it's interesting. What's interesting to consider is how much of a villain he is supposed to be. Joker is canonically the villain in Batman.
Not only that, but the film posits him as what people have argued he always is, which is the other side of the coin to Batman.
Yeah.
Right? And so the film here makes this, you know, even, it ties the connection even more closely by potentially, or raising the issue that he is Batman's half-brother. Right, which the film denies at this point, but, you know, you never know how it could play out.
You never know what they might do in Joker 2.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, although it's going to be interesting to see how it adds up, because you do see Bruce Wayne in this, and he's about 10 years old. Well, he's at the age that his parents are killed, because you see that happen. And Joker is, you know, Joaquin Phoenix's age. So it'd be interesting to see how the maths works out.
Yes.
But, actually, can I just quickly finish the point about the final bit of the film? Because I was going to say that you talk about being a kind of despair that this is the only way he can matter, and I see that, but by that point, like I say, I think at this point he's supposed to have become the villain. He's become the Joker now, and you know he doesn't. Well, whether he's making an attempt to escape or not is not entirely clear. He's kind of running around. It's like he's leading the guy on a chase at the end. You know, going back and forth like in a Tom and Jerry cartoon. You know, so killing the social worker right at the end there feels actually like a gratuitous killing for him, not for the film, but for him. You know, like one that is not necessary for him to express anything about himself in that respect. It's not one that comes out of despair, for me.
You're right. I don't think it does come from despair at that moment. I think it comes from a kind of a revenge on the system. You know, it's like it rhymes with the whole beginning where the social worker isn't listening.
Yeah.
Right. So and quite a lot is made of that, actually. You know, so the social worker is there to look after him, to check in on him, and she doesn't listen at all. She doesn't care at all. And then she says, afterwards, well, they don't care about you and they don't care about me. but they're kind of like very different positions, right? Like kind of, one is on 7 medications just to survive. So that last scene rhymes with that, and actually I think what's interesting is that it happens off screen, So I loved it. I mean, I have to think about it some more. There were images in it that I just think, were like so expressive and beautiful. That bit where he kills, the guy who made him lose his job.
Yes.
And then like his whole face is splattered, with blood, and there's blood on the wall. And it's just kind of, such an incredible image, and then that whole interplay, which is so destabilizing, and I think the tone is just perfect, right? Is
between him and the dwarf.
Yeah,
Yeah, it surprised me actually how tonally adept that scene was.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it, because what I knew was going to happen was that having locked the door from the inside on the chain, I knew that the dwarf was going to try and reach the chain and not be able to.
No, you see, that caught me by surprise. So you're more observant.
Yeah, no, I got that from the start, and I thought, is it going to be in an attempt to escape after because he's just stabbed the big guy in the neck and in the head, and he's dead. And in the aftermath, is the dwarf going to? I'm sorry, keep on the dwarf, but I don't know his character's name. Is it going to be in like a panic that he runs to the door and he's terrified, and then it tries to make the joke out of it? Because that would have been, I don't think that would have worked. But it lets the scene calm down, and they speak, and then he says, "You can go." And I guess the question is still in your head a little bit as to, is he playing with him? But then he says, "Oh, I can't get out," and he goes, "Oh yeah, sorry," and he lets him go. And he says to him, I think, "You were always nice to me." Everyone else considers him a freak. Yes. Joker, this is not the dwarf. Everyone considers the dwarf a freak as well, and keep making jokes about his height. But no, he says, "You were always nice to me." The Joker says, and that's I found that an effective moment and believable.
I think there are many. I think one of the things about the film is, that you get the sense that he's someone who's trying to keep a lid on things and always on the verge of losing it. So he really is a threat to other people. And then, the film does something very complex, which is, to show you both the threat that he could present to other people, and also how he is personally insulted that people treat him so badly when he's trying to do nice things. So, the incident with the child on the bus, right? And then also a little bit the incident with Bruce Wayne, across the fence.
Yeah, with
right?
the magic tricks.
Yeah, they're all attempts to please, but you can see why they're falling, why they're going so badly, right? Why other people see them as like threatening. But you can also understand his point of view on, he's surprised that people finding them threatening. So I think that the film being able to do that, I think is really quite amazing, really. I love the way he's filmed, Joaquin Phoenix. So like all of the first scenes, it really is like shrouded, in just like melancholy and sadness and bleakness and poverty. So kind of what we see is him working as a clown, and he's carrying an advertisement for a local shop, and some kids take it away from him, and he chases after them because he's desperate. It's his livelihood, right? You get a sense he's supporting his mother in this kind of flat, and of course he gets beaten up, and then on top of that, his boss tells him that he doesn't believe him. Why would anyone steal that sign unless they're going to take that money for the sign out of his paycheck and so on. So you get a sense of someone who's abused by the system and who doesn't matter and who's kind of just clinging on. Yeah, and actually from his face, the travel on the bus, the conversations with the mother, you really get a sense of sadness, bleakness, melancholy.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of You Were Never Really Here.
Yes, very much.
And it made me wish I was watching You Were Never Really Here, frankly, on the screen that size as well.
Well, It reminded me of that,
The
but
relationship with the mother
I
as
was
well.
happy to see this. I mean, the only fault that I'm willing to pick up on at this point, because I really loved it, and I think the only thing that that I expected that doesn't come across is intelligence, right? So, you know, one of the things that, you know, the Joker is meant to be Batman's equal, right? You know, it's like the other side of Batman, the other face of Batman, right? Like, you know, so on the one hand he's brighter, but on the other hand he's meaner and more evil and dangerous, right?
And less predictable. He's kind of the
exactly.
maniacal element to him.
And actually, I think the film gets at that lack of predictability incredibly well. You know, whilst also showing how it gets there. But what it doesn't show you, or what you never what you never see, is a kind of a native intelligence that will mean that he will be a threat to Gotham and Batman later on, right? Like he's depicted as a not very bright person, a person who doesn't get it.
Certainly has no social intelligence, but also can't really spell. You know,
yes,
doesn't seem to have any kind of intellectual ability.
He doesn't even have cunning. He's made to seem a bit of an innocent, really, until, you know, he finds his celebrity on television. And actually, so A, that's a weakness for me, and B, that reminds me that the film has a whole argument of celebrity as the only type of being that matters in the culture presented.
Well, people kind of have value through television and the media.
Yes.
So he kind of starts to gain value himself when the papers pick up, and you get these scenes where on the train everyone's reading the papers, and they're not about him specifically because no one knows who he is, but they're about this clown killing these three guys who died.
And that has a rhyme with all of these serial murders and, you know, what do you call those, you know, people who go and shoot kind of in high schools and so on.
School shooters.
School shooters. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is about claiming an identity that the culture at large denies you. You know, so I thought that was interesting. I mean, it has all these rhyming things.
That one of the shots towards the end of the bank of screens pulling out, and all the sounds overlapping from various people talking about him and his adverts and stuff, and gives that sort of montage of audiovisual media was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So, but tell me more, because I've rarely seen you come out of a film in such a bad mood.
I was in a bad mood because I felt it was fascist propaganda and pornography a little bit, but then I could have kind of coped with that, and we'd have talked about it. And then some of the members of the audience applauded. I thought, how are you applauding this of all films? I mean, I don't remember anyone applauding Black Panther. You know, which I think as a film, as a kind of superhero film that has sort of political pretensions and values and that sort of thing, was much more deserving of it. You know, this is a film. Everything about this film, everything about its aesthetic, and everything about its timing and its tone, to me is like I said, a film that is high on its own sense of self-importance, that it believes it's an important film, that it wants you to believe it's an important film.
There's no question that it believes it's an important film, right? I think it's quite a daring film. You know, I mean, I think, and in fact, you know, I was reading something about it because it's just something that cropped up on my feed. You know, about how Warner Brothers, you know, what a gamble this was for Warner Brothers, because it is taking one of the main characters of the DC universe, right, and kind of, you know, making a relatively small budget kind of character study, arty film of it, right? And what would the impact of that be on, you know, the DC universe as a whole? So I think the film was seen as a risk to make, financially, for those reasons.
Yeah. Well, that may well be the case. I mean, I imagine it will. Well, it's gone down very well. I mean, every poster you see of it has got the 5-star reviews plastered all over it.
It's gone down very well. I think, you know, but also, you know, the comparison to some of these other films, I think, as far as, you know, these types of films go, it was relatively low budget.
Well, the budget I can see here says 55 to 64 million dollars.
As opposed to the
As opposed to
or
well, this is not an
300
action movie by any
Yeah.
means. It's not a spectacle in that sense.
Exactly.
I mean, actually, in a way, obviously things like the set design and the production values are very high in this.
It cost the same as Rambo: Last Blood. Let's.
Yeah, how much was that? Yeah, 50 million.
Yeah. So,
but
to put it in perspective,
sure. The budget to me sort of says actually, you kind of could make this film, at least if everyone got paid a bit less, for like $30 million. The giving it a budget of 60 says prestige drama.
Listen, I mean, the thing about Rambo: Last Blood is it has a box office star. Kind of. Sylvester Stallone can still sell tickets in this type of action film. He's been doing it in the Expendables films. Whereas actually, this film doesn't have a box office star. Joaquin Phoenix is not a box office star. And Robert De Niro in a supporting part is not a box office star either at the moment, right? So, I actually...
But they are stars. I mean, but I think that kind of positions it, like I said, in prestige drama sort of territory. And I think if you give a prestige drama a 60 million budget as opposed to a 30 million budget, you're saying like this is the drama to see. This is the talky movie to see. Do you see what I mean?
Well, why not? I mean, I think actually...
I'm not arguing. I'm not making any particular argument about it.
The thing about this budget, which is very low for this type of film, is that also it's everywhere visible on screen.
Well, do you think it's low for this type of film? That's what I mean.
Yes, I do.
It's not a flashy superhero movie. It's not full of effects. That's what I mean. Like, it's not positioning itself as a superhero movie. It's positioning itself as a realistic social drama.
I don't think it's realistic. I think it's very
realistic, quote unquote.
I think,
but about real problems, issues, real world. That's what I mean.
It's got all of the scenes in the subway. It's got all of the scenes with the car crashes. It's got the scenes with all of the extras wearing the clown outfits. I mean, you saw nothing like that in Rambo: Last Blood, which had the same budget.
No, well, I mean, I'm not the one who brought up Rambo: Last Blood. I'm not suggesting that Rambo: Last Blood looked like it cost $50 million.
Well, I mean, let's not get lost down this rabbit hole. Okay, it is objectively a small budget for a comic book film.
Yeah. I wonder how much Logan cost. Because that's the kind of comic book film it's sort of, I mean, for one thing, R-rated.
Logan did have a box office star, though.
It did, and it was more heavily based on, I mean, X-Men, all that. It's not. I mean, the thing about Batman and Joker is every time you see a new one, it's new people making a new version. That's not the case with X-Men, with...
Okay, see the budget.
But I'm just interested in the budget. That had a $97 million budget.
And that was a few years ago, so...
Well, 2 years ago.
Okay.
But I mean, that was also doing much more by way of...
Double the budget.
Logan was also doing much more by way of effects, production design, sets, set in the future, all that sort of thing. So, I mean, it makes sense, apart from the star, who was a bigger box office star, I agree, that it cost more to produce, I think. I'm not making any particular point when I say that, the budget for this is... I just think that the budget for this, to me, sends a signal that actually it's bigger than you might actually expect for a film that looks like it.
Well, I mean,
But I don't know. But I'm not really making any particular point about that. I think, that is not the main signal of the sort of self-importance of the film. I think the shallow focus is...
Well, I love the shallow focus. I thought that was expressive, and I thought that was in keeping with the story that was being told at the beginning of the film. And actually, there are some aspects of Joaquin Phoenix's performance that are just dazzling and beautiful. I mean, the way that he moves, the way that when he gets to talk, when he goes on the talk show, right, and, he admits that he's, people are making fun of him, and the way he adopts now that camp attitude, that sing-songy thing, and he does very elegant things with his arms and his body, and all of a sudden he becomes like a camp gay man. I thought that was like so interesting and beautiful. Like, there's kind of, there's something about the way that he uses his body throughout. That is expressive and moving. It's almost that, after all of this pent up stuff, with the mother in the apartment, and where you see he's so thin in that film, and he's got that shoulder jutting out, and actually you have this incredible shape, that's filmed of his back, which is really like an Auschwitz victim or something, right? You see all the vertebrae at the back with, dislocated shoulder and so on, and then when he gets into that, he's moving like Fred Astaire, right? In the clown costume kind of, gives him elegance and personality and, ease and movement through the world. I thought that was wonderful.
I like to see him move, and I think he looked, very, very striking. And I think there's a shot. It's one of the shots that was in the trailer actually, when just before he kills the big guy in his apartment, when he's got his arms out supporting himself on the wall and his head's bowed, and then he kind of picks up his head and it's to the side. He's got the white face paint on, and he just looks looks weird and terrifying and angular and sort of blank and very intimidating, and mad. There are things I really appreciate about that, and there are quite striking. But I do still think that a lot of it, particularly when you get to these shots where it's just hanging on him, kind of moving about in whatever, moving his arms and twisting and whatever. There are these moments where I just think, why? Actually, what is this expressing at this point? How are we hanging on this shot for so long? It does feel like it feels like it's like let the star do what he likes, and it doesn't feel controlled by the director.
Well, I disagree, and and I hope I'm pointing out to one of the ways that it is controlled. As the film progresses, he begins to find ease in the world through costuming and murder. He's become this murderous clown now, and he's found himself. And actually this all culminates in that, almost musical number, that dance that he does through the steps, right? Which is then treated comically because, out of focus, you begin to see the shapes of the two policemen that then come into focus. And that is like Singing in the Rain or something, right? Like, that whole dance there, it's done as that, as a moment of glee, right? And it is, I think, about kind of finding his place in the world, and that frees his body as it frees his mind, right? Like, he's done the unthinkable, and now he matters.
Yeah. I found it kind of... maybe I already hated it too much by this point. I really hated the bloke who took a photo at that point as well.
I
took a photo of the screen.
I know.
I was hoping he would do that again so I could slap the phone out of his hand.
I was going to... Because then you always think in moments like that, that idiot, you always think, if I say something, am I then going to spoil other people's film for the second time? Yeah, am I going to spoil other people's pleasure in the film for this, for another time? So it was one of those things where you're back,
Yeah.
You get tense.
I wanted to think a little bit about the racial components of the film. Because it occurred to me that a great many of the supporting characters in and around Arthur's life are black.
Yes.
You've got the social worker who he ends up killing at the end, who's a black woman. You've got the sort of neighbour in his apartment block, played by Zazie Beetz.
Yes.
Is black, and he fantasises about her. I mean, it's not presented as such straight away.
No.
So they kind of meet in the lift, and they share this thing of, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. My life sucks so much. And then after he kills the guys on the subway, when he makes it back to the apartment block, I think that's when he basically barges in on her and kisses her. And then it's suggested that they develop this relationship. So then when his mother is in the hospital, she's there comforting him. And I was thinking this has to be delusional. I tell you, no, it's because before he kisses her, it's he follows her to work. Remember on the train, on the subway, he follows her to work, and there's a shot which I really hated it was a long shot and a long take of the bank that she works in, Bank of Gotham, and him following her and then pulling back, and it was just a boring shot, and everything was done through this oppressively loud soundtrack that was trying to build up the drama. It wasn't done through visual filmmaking. I didn't like that, but he follows her, and then later on she comes to his door in his apartment and says, "Did you follow me to work today?" And he says yes, and she says, "I wish you'd come in and shot the place. I've shot my boss, or blowing it up." And that immediately I was going, right, this has to not be realistic. Like because that is not the response of a woman who's been followed to work, to take it as a joke.
You're cleverer than I, because I didn't get that it was delusional until the last scene with her.
Which one was the last one?
When
she walks in on him in her apartment.
Yes.
And that's when you see all those previous shots of them together, and then it cuts to the same thing, but she's not there, revealing that she's not there. Now, I said from the start, if this turns out to be a real relationship that's happening, I cannot believe it. So I was glad that it is revealed to be a delusion of his.
I was glad that it was revealed to be a delusion, because it also tells us something about his character and how it's developing and how he's losing control.
Yeah, well, it also relates to the delusion that he has of being on the TV show at the start.
Yeah, and also how he's a danger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and that unpredictability, really, that he's not conscious of the effect that he has on others.
But to return to the point I was making 10 minutes ago, before I got sidetracked by myself, about the racial component, right? So she is a black woman who he fantasizes about and kind of lusts for, and but she's not in his life at all. Actually, she's scared of him. At the end, I mean, she barely knows him, and then because he's in an apartment, she's scared of him. The kids right at the start who
beat him up,
steal his sign and beat him up,
are black. Yeah.
They're people of colour, certainly. I don't think they were black, but they were. I mean, what I'm just saying is they were definitely like not WASP kids. You know what I mean?
I thought they were black. I
think they might have been like Latino, but I don't want to get too much into sort of identifying exactly what they were. Point is, I think they weren't white. Okay.
So people of colour.
And that kind of reminds me actually of the Central Park 5.
No.
I think it might have been 25 or 30 years ago, this crime that these 5 black kids, I think, were convicted of, and then it turned out in like 2002 they were wrongly convicted. There was no DNA evidence that tied into it, all that sort of stuff. No good evidence that tied into this, but they'd been convicted of it and put in prison for a long time. It kind of reminded me of that. And then there was this bit on the subway where he shoots the 3 guys, which reminded me of... I wish I could remember the name. There was a guy in the 80s who shot a group of black people on the subway. And I think... And again, it really reminded me of that. And I'm not sure it's accidental, but in this, it's... they're transformed from black kids into kind of yuppie white guys, And it's sort of... The effect that it sort of had for me was to sort of, like, in recapitulating these crimes, because these were New York crimes as well, which is why I kind of brought up New York as well. Like, it's so New York, this film, as opposed to Gotham. It just kind of made me think, what is the project here in bringing these things up and changing them as it does, or not changing them? I'm having trouble kind of thinking through it, basically.
Well, the way that I read it all, and I did not read it as a right-wing film at all. I read it very much as a critique, and a quite a daring one, of American capitalism at the moment. So the fact that the 3 guys are white, that they're arrogant, that they're rich, they're obviously like stockbrokers working for Wayne himself. Right, because actually, whenever you see the Batman films, you never see, the Bruce Wayne's father is always a saint. Here, he is like, a capitalist playing the game.
And wanting to become mayor as well.
And wanting to become mayor, and kind of somebody rich and uncaring and, and so on. And brutal, kind of, yeah. He beats him up. So, I see it as a kind of a critique of a culture that's unraveling and in which kind of people have no way out, basically.
The thing about the Central Park 5 is they didn't do it. And in this, these kids did it. And the shooting on the subway in real life, the one that I recognise, was racially motivated. And in this, obviously, it's not. There's nothing racist.
But I just think you're pushing the analogy too far.
I don't think I am. I think it's...
I think you are. I mean, the kids, are... And this is almost like a typical New York scene. You have kids horsing around, and they just steal this guy's sign. Right? So, how you jump from there to the Central Park murders or
because it's not
whatever
just inside, it's the beating. Because it's the group. It really reminded me of it. Made me think of it very specifically.
You're making all these moves in the argument that actually just simply don't work if that analogy's not there.
Well, but you can draw on it. I mean, if I can pick up on it, then someone making the film could have picked up on it as well.
But to criticize the film, for...
it felt deliberate to me.
Well,
it felt deliberate. It did not feel accidental. Once might have been a coincidence, but twice.
But you're making all these twists because the guys on the subway in this instance were white, kind of stockbrokers.
Yeah. So the question I'm asking is if it has a relationship to the real life crime, then why the change?
Well, I don't see that, and actually, let me tell you, if you had made those guys, black in the subway, the film would have had a completely kind of, that would have been a charged scene, and actually, I think that would have been completely unacceptable. So I just don't get your line of argument at all.
Well, that's why I'm trying to think through it. I'm trying to think through it.
I mean, he's not killing black people, until the very end. So he kills one black social worker. All the other people that he kills, including the most important ones, including his mother, including the Robert De Niro character, and blah blah blah, they're all white.
I know, but that's the point. The thing about the subway killing is that difference between the real life killing that I'm comparing it to is that they're white.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's not based on anything. That basically what you want to show is arrogant stockbrokers, hooray Henrys, who think they own the world, who are harassing this poor woman on the bus, and who then beat him up. Yeah, and then he shoots them. Maybe, what if the scene is about that, instead of some kind of wild analogy here that you're making with black
I don't think it's wild, because I think there's enough specificity to the crimes in the way that they are depicted.
Well, I don't even know what crimes you're talking about.
Well,
I don't know who they are.
Well,
Well,
then it's lost on you.
Well, it's lost. But is it there? Is my question.
I felt it was, but like I say, obviously it's something that, having just seen the film, I'm trying to think through, and it takes more than just a go straight after, But I think it is in there, and it is troubling to me.
Well, I don't see it. I mean, there's no black character in the film of which their blackness is a necessity or specified. Kind of
Brian Tyree Henry
was my favorite actor of the moment. He's the record keeper of the hospital. You could have cast that any way you wanted to. It didn't need to be black.
Yeah.
Right? The love object, you could have cast that any way you wanted. It didn't need to be black. Right? The social worker, again, didn't need to be black. In fact, if you wanted to be, historically accurate to the period, maybe, but, chances are that they probably would have been white. So I think there's kind of an attempt to kind of, be representative of a certain kind of New York, whilst always doing the same thing that Hollywood movies do, where actually all of the central characters are white. So, but I don't think it's like some right-wing conspiracy thing.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think they're smart enough to make a conspiracy. I don't want to go on about it because, like I say, I have just seen the film and I don't have anything smarter to say about it at this point. But it's something that really struck me. I think there is a racial component to the film that is worth investigating, worth thinking about.
Well, perhaps you're right.
That's the most I can say, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Well, kind of. Anyway, I kind of. I think there is something interesting to say about race in the film. I'm not sure that making the analogies that you have to real historical incidents in New York City is the way to go around it. Particularly when what should link them, in an important example that you gave, which is race, is not there.
The point is that the difference is what drew my attention. That's the point.
Fair enough. But I think we're losing sight of the film itself.
Yes, we are.
It is like kind of going through a rabbit hole online or something. You're going from one thing to another, and we're losing kind of sight of what we just saw. Which I thought was a very daring, kind of, very daring. Daring in a Hollywood big studio way. And which I thought kind of very interesting, and which I think is it's a film that will resonate very much with the way that kind of people see the world now.
I think it's right-wing comfort food.
Well, yeah. Perhaps you're right, but
I think the downtrodden lefties are the enemy.
I think it's a
terrifying mob.
I think it's a revolutionary.
They're going to destroy New York City.
I think it's a revolutionary film. I can't. So I suppose it's on this question, because in a way what the film is arguing is that in order to be acknowledged in this culture, you've got to kill rich people. Rich and famous people have to die for you to even, for your existence to be barely recognized. Now, is that a right-wing perception, or is that a revolutionary way of looking at the world?
Are you asking me?
Well, I just think that is the question.
Are we going to leave that one hanging in the air?
Yeah, we are going to leave that one hanging in the air because, you may be right. But I don't know. I think it's definitely a film. I would like to see it again. Because, part of the reason why I think the film is so absorbing and so interesting is, I'm back to smoking again, and I'd forgotten to take my nicotine, patch with me. And actually it absorbed me completely. Like I was, Yeah, so normally I get twitchy.
Very smoky images. That's what the application does for you.
Normally I get twitchy, and this I thought the time flew. Though, as you saw, as soon as the credits went on, I whizzed outside. So
that's one thing I would say for it, is that it's a couple of hours long, and the time does fly. Because actually, by the time the Joker gets into the theatre that's showing Modern Times, because he's tracking down Thomas Wayne to confront him. That to me was like, is this coming to the end of the film? And then I checked, and it's like halfway through. A lot had happened, and so it does feel economical. It feels like it's very full.
Yes, I mean, I kind of, I was very much absorbed by it, and unlike you, I think it's so interesting visually. Actually, I have to think about it more. But I was really captivated by it, and I do think, I thought when I saw Pain and Glory, I thought, oh my God, this will be so fab because Antonio Banderas is sure to win the Oscar. And then I kind of, you see Joaquin Phoenix in this, and he is doing such extraordinary things that it made me rethink my Antonio Banderas thing. Though I do hope Antonio Banderas wins for personal reasons, but actually it's nowhere near as dazzling and theatrical and elegant as though actually very interesting. They're both kind of performances steeped in depression and sadness and so on, though as soon as the Joker becomes full-fleshed, then that disappears, right? So I think the character...
His laughter disappears as well.
Yeah.
There's this thing about his laughing condition. He can't help but laugh. And he hands a card to people to explain, I'm not laughing at you. This is just saying that I can't help. But then once he discovers the truth about where he came from, that he's adopted and the abuse by his mother, he goes away and he kills his mum and he says to her, there was never anything wrong with me. You always told me there was. And it's at that point that stops. And he there is a really funny line after when he's wearing the face paint and his colleagues come round and they say, "What's with the face paint? You got a new job?" And he says, "No, my mum died. I'm celebrating."
You know what's so interesting?
It's a weight off him. His life changes at that point.
Yes. It suddenly occurs to me, and this is a measure of how great Joaquin Phoenix's performance is, that we haven't even talked about, like Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson? Oh, the Jack Nicholson joke, you mean?
Yeah. Which is a great performance, right? So, and it made, that Tim Burton Batman film, as far as I'm concerned. There's that wonderful moment of reveal in the office. And it has kind of very similar scenes. The scenes where the Batman's parents get shot, is the way that the film opens and so on and so forth. So, it's a measure of how different and interesting and great Joaquin Phoenix's performance is, that you're not talking about, Jack Nicholson, you're not talking about Cesar Romero. Obviously, one had to talk a little bit about Heath Ledger because there's ways in which those performances intersect. I mean, Heath Ledger did something really interesting and original with that character as well, no question. But
and
anyway.
The films and the Joker film and the Nolan films do want to share a more kind of down to earth feeling to their world.
Though the Nolan film, it's in such a sophisticated and interesting kind of visual world. Yeah, Gotham is such a such a different place, right? It's a fantasy place as well. Yeah, it's an imaginary place, much more kind of clearly than this. It looks completely...
Well, that was shot in Chicago, I think.
Okay, but it looks vast and grand and, this kind of... it's a much smaller scale film. So
like I mean, I don't think the comparisons to King of Comedy and Taxi Driver are... I think they're actually quite deliberate. So that feeling, of that walking around New York in the 1970s.
I think that's
that Paul Schrader thing.
I think that's quite deliberate.
What's this thing? The lone. What's his character called? The lone walker, whatever he calls him. It's that Paul Schrader thing. Do you know that thing? Like his particular sort of archetypal character who just walks around alone. I can't remember what they call it. Anyway, that's.
I think the analogies to Taxi Driver and to the comedy, what's the King of Comedy, are very deliberate. There's no question about that.
And, but are they more than references?
Well, I think it's referencing those worlds, and yes, a kind of an underworld of neon, of, kind of people who are not recognized, who have no place in the culture, who are kind of slightly dislocated, and who kind of assert a right to be through murder. So that is very much what Taxi Driver is about. And then the whole other celebrity dimension, I mean, that's where the King of Comedy comes in, and the film does pick up on that. So I think those are three strands that the film works through. Kind of this thing of alienation, mental stability in a cruel, unacknowledging world, a world that doesn't recognize people as people and doesn't treat them with any dignity. So there's this kind of an anonymity, alienation. So that's one strand. The other strand is about celebrity culture. Celebrity having a currency, like being rich. And kind of the thing about murder, really. So I think, and race is the other strand. I think you're right. So I think those elements all kind of maybe deserve more thought than we're giving them at this moment, and might be a reason to see the film again.
I'm not sure I'm keen to see it a second time, but
well, we have to see Judy first. So,
the other thing that just occurred to me, thinking about race again, was the Fred Astaire film.
Yes,
because it's quite a specific scene. I feel like has been chosen.
I think it's from Follow the Fleet.
I don't recognise the film itself.
I think it's from Follow the Fleet, and it's
black kind of engine workers or sailors or something.
Yeah,
that are primarily in
they
the
are
sea.
at sea, and the song begins being sung by a black singer, and then and
then Fred Astaire joins in.
Fred
And what
Astaire
happens
joins
in
in.
that scene in the film Joker, as opposed to the Fred Astaire film, is he's watching this, and it is at the point where he's just been given the gun by the fella at work, and he's sort of playing with it, practicing with it, whatever, posing with it in a way, and the shot is from kind of behind him at 3/4, and he's pointing the gun, and he's pointing it towards the TV, and the focus changes, and he's basically pointing the gun at these black people on the telly, and then he moves and he points it somewhere else, and then he gets up and he starts dancing like
Fred.
Well, yeah.
Well,
like
I
Fred,
wasn't sure
suppose.
that he was pointing at black people. I thought he was pointing at the TV.
He was pointing it at the TV, but the shot then that's composed by the film is of him pointing the gun at the black people.
I didn't get that. I actually
I thought,
I didn't register that.
I don't. It's to me, the shot is not him like the character going, "I will point the gun at black people." It's him pointing the gun, but the shot that the film then actually shows you, what the image it creates, is kind of striking, and I thought, wow, that's. That's it.
I mean, the whole thing about race is that I don't detect any kind of, overt racism in the film.
No, I don't think it's
don't.
racist. That's certainly not what I'm saying. But seems to me there is some sort of strategy of representation going on that I can't figure out.
Right. Well,
and that is where I have to leave it for the minute.
yes.
I mean,
I think we're exhausting it this time around. I mean, I would be very curious to see it again. I loved it. And again, I was very struck by the performance and really by the visuals and by those choices, right? Like, this is a film that very much rests on faces and does so in kind of, very fascinating ways.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. Someone had to.
Yes, but I'm sorry you didn't. Someone had to. All right, let's leave it here. So we might revisit this depending on what Mike thinks. But for the time being, we are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Do get in touch. I mean, I'll be really.
And do get in touch. Yes.
I'd be really, really keen to hear what people think about Joker, because
me too.
I am up in the air on it in all sorts of ways. Really, I don't like it, but there's a lot of food for thought in it, and and the fact that response has been so polarized as well.
Yes, rarely has a discussion between us been so polarized.
Well, I meant response kind of in the rest of the world, but you're right. Like between us,
yes,
yeah. So I'd be really keen to hear what others think.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.